Discover the amazing and touching lives of ordinary Victorians. Surprising transformations exposed. The chill of autumn licked at Claire's skin as she stood in the attic, eyes scanning the room for anything remotely useful. Memories lingered like dust, 1,000 pinpricks of her childhood that felt hauntingly out of reach. With each box opened, her heart sank further into a familiar despair. She was reminded of how burdensome the weight of expectation felt. Emma rummaged nearby, her vibrant energy underscoring Claire's growing anxiety. What was she providing, other than love and dutiful sacrifice? The whispers of their tight-knit Victorian town echoed in her mind, opinions about public education swarming like dried leaves in the air. Had she, a mere product of modest beginnings, made the right choice? "Mom, look at this!" Emma exclaimed, pulling out an old journal that had been tucked away in the corner. Claire's heart raced as she took the worn leather cover from her daughter's hands. This was her father's journal, a relic of hope and innovation, a contrast to her own daily struggle against scarcity. As Claire flipped through its pages, her breath hitched at the dreams he had penned. Dreams that were never realized due to a community that couldn't envision beyond their own shadow. She felt the sting of his failures seep into her bones, mingling with her own fears. What if she couldn't change the narrative? What if she remained a footnote in her town's story? Claire took a deep breath, heart clenching. The journal, a mirror reflecting her determination and desperation, spurred an idea amidst the chaos of her thoughts. Could she honor her father's unappreciated legacy by showcasing his inventions? It would take a life of its own if only she could gather the courage to aim higher. Before she could spiral deeper into her doubts, she interrupted her racing thoughts with a reminder. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Determined, Claire began reaching out to local artists and craftsmen, hoping to gather support. But each encounter felt like a brick wall solidified by the elite skepticism. They were entrenched in their status, unwilling to champion anything that didn't reflect their polished image. Anguish gnawed at her spirit as she confronted the very people who could either buoy her ambitions or crush her aspirations beneath their weighty expectations. As the days ticked ominously closer to the exhibition, Claire grappled with continuous inner turmoil. Would her father's unfulfilled dreams become hers, leading to victory or to the same despair that once shrouded his legacy? With every setback, the tempo of her anxiety heightened. Muscles tightened, and the certainty of her impending failure whispered from the corners of her mind. Then, as the night before the exhibition wrapped her in an uneasy stillness, Claire glanced at Emma, asleep and innocent amidst the chaos. The thought of giving up loomed large, threatening to engulf her as the uncertainty clawed at the edges of her determination. Seeing her daughter drift into a world of boundless possibility crushed her resolve, intertwining her fear of failure with the desperate urge to protect Emma from a similar fate. She stood alone in that quiet space, torn as the weight of familial legacy collided with the threat of losing herself in the eyes of an unkind audience. The night deepened, and with it, her fears curled tighter around her heart, whispering, could breaking this cycle of disappointment truly be within her grasp? What was at stake, she wondered? Would she be enough? The dawn arrived, but Claire felt as if it were still night inside her mind, the shadows of doubt refusing to yield. As she sipped her lukewarm coffee, she could almost feel her father's presence, urging her to forge ahead, yet the specter of past failures crept in like a shiver down her spine. The ticking clock marked each second, each moment a countdown to her own reckoning. Claire's heart drummed in her chest as she prepared for the exhibition, surrounded by bits of her father's legacy. His inventions lay arranged like fragile hopes scattered across the table. What had started as a tribute now felt like a weighty expectation. Was she merely rehashing old dreams that could shatter under the scrutiny of sharp tongues? With every brushstroke applied to the exhibits, an unease pulsed through her hands, as if she was trying to paint over her doubts instead of confronting them. She glanced at Emma, who was fully engrossed in her own projects. The youthful enthusiasm radiating from her daughter provided a flicker of determination in Claire's heart. Here was a new generation, unencumbered by the ghost of her father's failure. Perhaps that spark ignited within Emma could be a light for Claire as well. The realization tinged her determination with urgency. Drawing a deep breath, Claire decided it was time to break the silence surrounding her father's work. The first step was outreach. She hesitated for a moment, fingers hovering above her keyboard. Would sharing her father's story be greeted with the same skepticism she had faced before? She needed to redefine her narrative, to weave her family's story into a fabric that held the power to connect. Statistics, emotional anecdotes, and evidence of innovation merged in her mind, composing the framework of her outreach campaign. The moment she hit send, adrenaline surged through her. Inside came the flicker of realization. This wasn't just about showcasing her father's inventions, it was about claiming her own narrative. What if she infused her struggles and aspirations into the very message she was sending out? Each word crafted a deeper authenticity, reaching for an audience who did not just see her father's inventions, but felt the pulse of his unfulfilled dreams through Claire's resilience. Days passed, filled with anticipation and mounting anxiety. But with every response she received from the community, a small embers of hope began to glow. Some were supportive, sharing stories of similar struggles as artists and creators themselves. Others were far less gracious, questioning the relevance of a past that seemed rooted in another time. Each response stoked the fire of Claire's resolve. She knew she wouldn't win everyone over, but perhaps she could foster understanding among those open to the legacy she sought to revive. Behind closed doors, however, Claire still battled her darker thoughts. Self-doubt wrestled with budding determination. What if this whole endeavor was a misstep? What if the audience found more faults than glimmers of inspiration? The very night her campaign went live, a message pinged on her phone that sent her heart racing. The time had come to face the criticisms that would inevitably be thrown her way. Claire closed her eyes, steadying her breath. The work was honest, filled with a mixture of her father's artistry and her own struggles. It was never going to be perfect, but perhaps that was the point. Could imperfection be a strength rather than a flaw? As dawn kissed the horizon, Claire felt a quiet resolve surge within her. This was about transcending legacy, rewriting a narrative muddled by disappointment. Rising from her chair, she understood there was still a long way to go. Challenges lay ahead that would either fortify or topple her efforts. With heart racing and unshaken focus, she stepped into the day, ready to confront not just the skeptics outside, but the fears residing deep within. The true trial of her spirit awaited her at the exhibition. Would she weather the storm or crumble under pressure, faced with the opinions of those who could either empower or devastate her resolution? As the day of the exhibition wore on, Claire felt time bending, stretching her anxiety into an unbearable weight. With every tick of the clock, she could almost hear the unrelenting hum of judgment looming near. Stepping into the empty exhibition space, she took stock of her artifacts, each one laden with the stories of her father's ambitions. The polished metal gleamed under the bright lights, and through the silence of the room, she felt echoes of laughter and debate from her earliest memories, that magical mix of exhilaration and trepidation. She arranged the items meticulously, but as she paused to examine each piece, a flurry of doubts clouded her mind. What if the audience only saw the failure she had not yet reconciled with? The thought nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. Her father's inventions, once vivid with potential, now felt like unexploded bombs set to detonate the moment scrutiny laid eyes on them. Taking a deep breath, she clutched the edge of a workbench, grounding herself against the panic threatening to surge. Emma entered the space, her youthful energy palpable. "Mom, this looks amazing!" she exclaimed, her eyes wide in admiration. For a fleeting moment, Claire allowed herself to bask in that appreciation, though it quickly dissipated beneath layers of internal skepticism. "You really think so?" she asked, unable to mask the tremor in her voice. "Definitely! You've done something incredible here. It's not just about Dad, it's about you, too," Emma insisted. Her affirmation illuminated the shadows lurking within Claire, each word urging her to shift her perspective. Perhaps it was less about the past and more about what they could create together in the present. As the evening approached, Claire's mind wrestled with a decision looming at the fringes of her consciousness. If she truly wanted to claim her narrative, she needed to articulate her own story alongside her father's, her frustrations, her fears, her triumphs. No more hiding behind his legacy. She had to stand confidently in the light, not as merely a shadow of her father's achievements. The thought startled her. Even as it inspired clarity, it triggered an avalanche of fear. What if her story wasn't compelling enough? As she quickly made her way through the last details of setup, she found herself tapping into that frustration as fuel. With each interaction, she remembered those emails, from supporters and critics alike, each voice adding to the fabric of her challenge. Writing her statement had felt like shedding layers of misunderstandings, and now articulating her experience would do the same. When the doors opened and guests began trickling in, Claire planted herself at the entrance, determined to embrace any interaction. The moments blurred together, strangers mingling with familiar faces, and she was surprised by the honesty of conversations. Some people lingered, asking insightful questions about the innovations displayed. Others hovered, offering stories of their own creative battles, seeking solace in shared struggles. Yet the undercurrent of uncertainty remained. Claire spotted a few skeptics whispering in corners, their expressions cast in doubt as they scrutinized her father's creations with disdain. The bitterness of their words sliced through her like icy shards. Perhaps she had been naive to think her approach could transcend judgment. Faced with this reality, she felt a sudden rush of defiance. Why not confront that skepticism head-on? With clenched fists and a resolute heart, Claire decided she would speak during the opening address, sharing not just her father's journey, but her own battles against failure, acceptance, and redemption. It would be raw, unfiltered, and undeniably authentic. As she stepped up to the microphone, the room fell silent. Claire paused, scanning the faces before her, every skeptical gaze weighing heavy on her spirit. Would they receive her message with open minds, or would they loathe every word? Taking a steadying breath, she was about to discover exactly what she was made of, and what this venture might ultimately demand from her. Let me tell you, story. And as the words began to flow, Claire felt the jagged edges of her doubt begin to melt away. Would her story resonate, or was she prepared for the backlash to come? Claire's voice echoed slightly in the vastness of the exhibition space, drowning out her heartbeat as she began recounting her father's journey. Her nerves trembled uneasily beneath her calm facade, yet she pressed onward, words tumbling forth, each one unearthing memories of time spent in his workshop, learning through trial, error, and laughter. The audience leaned in, captivated, and for the first time she felt truly seen. not through the prism of her father's inventions, but as a vessel for her own truth. The initial warmth of their attention bolstered her confidence, igniting a fire deep within. Each anecdote she shared reclaimed parts of herself long buried beneath grief and expectation. She spoke of the countless nights spent scheming over blueprints, the stubbornness that drove her when things went awry, and the deep-seated fear of inadequacy that haunted her even now. This was not merely about sharing failure. It was about illuminating the path to resilience. Yet a nagging voice echoed persistently in her mind. What if this vulnerability led to judgment? What if they dissected her flaws, her weaknesses, and her struggles? But with each passing moment of her address, Claire understood that embracing her imperfections was liberating. These weren't just tales of her father. They were her stories, filled with raw emotion and passionate resolve. She was weaving a tapestry, not just of achievements, but of lessons learned amidst the chaos. As she surrendered to this new narrative, Claire noticed a shift in the room. Conversations ignited as she concluded, shared vigor replacing initial judgment, eyes now filled with understanding rather than suspicion. She had not only painted her father's legacy, she had infused a new life into it, creating space for her own. Her heart raced as she stepped down from the podium, glancing around at the gathered guests. The applause didn't just sound like reverberations of approval. It felt like a cleansing wave washing over her vulnerabilities. In that moment, she realized she had redefined her worth, not tethered solely to her father's accomplishments, but as an individual who had a journey worthy of acknowledgement. Claire's sense of urgency gave way to hope. Conversations thrummed around her as old friends approached, eager to share their own tales of struggle and innovation. She found herself listening intently, captivated by the myriad expressions of resilience threading through their experiences. The skepticism she had perceived earlier began to fade, replaced by a connectiveness born of shared challenges. Despite this newfound connection, a shadow of tension tugged at her. Would her newfound acceptance hold up against the inevitable critiques? She was already grappling with her fears, and the thought of facing an audience that could just as easily turn hostile filled her with dread. Would she have the courage to confront those doubts again when the applause faded? With determination seeping into her veins, Claire made a vow to not only welcome the praise, but also to face criticism head-on if it came. She recognized that the journey was far from over. It was just beginning. Each story she learned and shared would test her resolve and the essence of her identity. As the night wore on, Claire felt ignited with potential, realizing that being vulnerable was a strength, not a weakness. She began planning for the next exhibition, envisioning a space where creativity and courage could flourish side by side. A narrative not just of her legacy, but of hers to create. Just as her mind settled on this exciting trajectory, a familiar face emerged from the crowd, a former mentor she hadn't seen in years. Their eyes met, and Claire took a deep breath, ready to engage in a conversation that could either challenge or empower her further. Was this meeting a coincidence, or the very confrontation she'd been subconsciously preparing for? The moment Claire locked eyes with her former mentor, a whirlwind of emotion surged through her. His presence felt like an anchor, both reassuring and intimidating, stirring memories of her formative years strained by his high expectations and profound wisdom. She hesitated for just a second, battling against the tide of vulnerability that had surged within her since stepping off the podium. Yet, with a resolute breath, she approached him, each step fusing resolve with doubt. "Claire," he greeted, a soft smile growing on his lips. But she sensed an undercurrent of something deeper, an anticipation that echoed her own. "It's been a while," she managed, keeping her tone steady, though her heart raced. What would he think of her newfound narrative, of her bravery to share her flaws? Since graduation, yes. I've been following your progress, and I must say I'm impressed. His praise was like a delicate balm, easing some of the tension coiling in her chest. Thank you, but I wouldn't be where I am without your guidance, she replied, seeking the words to dismantle the weight of her student-teacher dynamic. It felt important to reclaim her autonomy, to redefine their relationship beyond mentor and mentee. I actually just spoke about my journey and my father. It was personal. His gaze shifted, a profound curiosity glimmering in his eyes. Personal is often where the most powerful stories lie. I noticed the audience's reaction. You invited them to connect with you as Claire, not just as the daughter of your father. That takes courage. His acknowledgement ignited a flicker of pride within her, but she soon felt the shadows creeping back. But what if they judge me for not being enough? Who defines enough? He countered, his voice low yet piercing. What matters is the authenticity of your expression. Letting them into your process is more impactful than any polished facade. Accept that not everyone will resonate, and that's okay. His words settled in her, challenging her deeply held fears. Could she truly embrace the idea judgment was a part of growth? Struggling with that question, Claire felt the weight of expectation looming larger. But I'm afraid of being misunderstood or overshadowed. That fear is universal, Claire. I too have faced that in my career. Understanding comes from the process of being vulnerable. It's a learning curve, one I'm still navigating. He shifted slightly closer, a flicker of sincerity in his gaze. The true measure of your impact isn't in approval, it's in being genuine to yourself. For the first time since stepping onto the podium, Claire began to see her mentor not as an intimidating figure, but as a fellow traveler in the landscape of creativity. The realization soaked in slowly but powerfully. Maybe it's time to create something that's entirely my own, she mused aloud, a new idea unfurling. To take everything I've learned, from my father, from you, and from my own failures, and build a narrative that's rooted in my own voice. Exactly, he replied, his enthusiasm palpable. The world needs your vision. Don't shy away from it. Define your boundaries fiercely and allow your unique voice to cut through. As they exchanged ideas, Claire felt a surge of inspiration overtaking her self-doubt. Each suggestion he offered opened new doors, sparked new pathways. Yet, clear within her heart was an unrelenting question. Was she ready to take this next step toward defining her individuality? With renewed vigor, Claire perceived the flickers of possibility illuminating her path. The conversation grew deeper, her mentor outlining the intricacies of establishing an authentic brand while cautioning against losing herself in the process. As the hours passed and their discussions broadened, a resolve took hold of Claire. The reality of embarking on this new chapter loomed ahead. She felt the stirrings of excitement, recognizing the dance between fear and ambition. Just as clarity settled in, a shadow of uncertainty persisted. Was she prepared to challenge not only her audience's expectations, but her own self-imposed limitations? As their exchange drew to a close, Claire couldn't help but feel the weight of potential hanging in the air. She realized she was standing at the edge of a precipice, one that could lead to extraordinary growth or paralyzing fear. "What will we create together, Claire?" he asked, a spark of challenge in his eyes. His question hung in the air like an unturned page as Claire wrestled with the decision that could shape her future. In this moment of quiet suspense, she felt the exhilarating rush of possibility, ready to engage with whatever came next. In the days that followed her encounter with her mentor, Claire found herself caught in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The heaviness of decision pressed upon her, almost suffocating at times. She had always been defined by the shadows of others, the expectations set by her father, and the weight of her mentor's high standards. Yet now she sensed the stirrings of an identity yearning to break free, to rise beyond the fabric woven from past expectations. Each evening, Claire sat in her small, dimly lit living room, surrounded by notebooks and art supplies, pushing the boundaries of her creativity. The remnants of self-doubt lingered, yet amidst sketches of new ideas and snippets of potential narratives, seeds of determination began to take root. She wanted to encapsulate more than just a story. She sought a voice that resonated with authenticity. Pen in hand, she articulated the raw pulse of her journey, documenting both the struggles and triumphs, hoping to frame her metamorphosis into something meaningful. Her mind often drifted back to her conversation with her mentor. The challenge he posed hung like a specter, both eerie and invigorating. What would they create together? Would it be a narrative that stirred emotions, or a project that paved new avenues for conversations about authenticity? The thought felt monumental, yet exhilarating. Days bled into each other as she grappled with the enormity of the task before her. Claire resolved to push herself beyond the comfort of her old patterns. She sought feedback from peers, reaching out to fellow creatives who often encouraged her to seize her voice. With each shared piece of her writing, she felt a shift, a subtle rebalancing of power from the invisible forces she had long permitted to define her. Despite the cacophony of doubts echoing in her mind, she was learning that vulnerability was not the failure she once perceived it to be. Rather, it was the precursor to an authentic connection. Yet doubt gnawed at her, a relentless whisper questioning her worthiness and talent. Was she equipped to translate her life experiences into a resonant narrative? The fear of landing flat amidst the weight of her aspirations loomed large, casting shadows over her burgeoning confidence. On a particularly challenging evening, she reached a boiling point, the tension erupting into frustration. Claire slammed her notebook shut, leaving behind a swirl of ink blots that mirrored her inner chaos. A thought crept in, an unwelcome guest. Perhaps she'd always be seen as the daughter of, rather than someone with her own rightful place. The fear of being eclipsed by her father's monumental legacy suffocated her, the ghost of comparison haunting each thought. Breathing deeply, Claire reminded herself of her mentor's words about defining her own boundaries. This was her canvas. It was time to confront the masks she wore and the stories she had yet to tell. She needed to acknowledge the shame that clung to her insecurities. It was there, in that moment of turmoil, that she found the resolve to take a leap. A chaotic assemblage of feelings transformed into the blueprint for her breakthrough. Emboldened, Claire dove headfirst into her work the following day. She crafted narrative arcs that threaded through her experiences, allowing fragile pieces of her vulnerability to become part of her strength. Words flowed freely, bridging gaps she never realized existed. As the days turned into weeks, a notion crystallized within her. She had the power to reshape the narrative surrounding her identity. The realization was monumental. A beacon, guiding her through the self-doubt that had whispered darkly in the corners of her mind. It was exhilarating and frightening in equal measure. Just as she felt the path ahead clarifying, an unexpected message pinged on her phone, an invitation that sent floods of anxiety rushing back. An opportunity for public speaking, an offer to share her story yet again, but this time entirely as herself. Was she ready to face such scrutiny once more? To stand in her truth when the spotlight beckoned? The timing felt precarious, the stakes undeniably high. Could she rise to the occasion, embracing the vulnerability she once feared? Claire felt the tension in her chest tighten again as she weighed the possibility of stepping into this new phase of her life. In that moment of choice, her heart raced, and she thought, This is what it means to be both terrified and alive. The real question hung like an unspoken challenge in her mind. Could she truly embrace who she was becoming? The invitation lingered in the air, electrifying yet suffocating. Claire stared at the message on her phone, as if waiting for it to dissolve into the ether. What did this even mean for her? Standing on that stage promised the thrill of sharing her story, but it also threatened to unearth the very insecurities she was striving to overcome. After days of pulsating creativity, the idea of addressing an audience cut through her newfound confidence like a knife. She recalled her mentor's voice resonating in her head. Authenticity breeds connection. But standing in front of an audience? Was she truly ready to expose her vulnerabilities in such a raw and public way? The thought festered, rousing both excitement and dread. Claire stuffed her notebook under her arm and decided it was time to confront the bubbling anxiety head-on. She made her way to a small cafe nearby, a familiar haven where she could jot down her thoughts, unfiltered and honest. As she settled into her corner booth, the aroma of coffee enveloped her, comforting yet grounding. She scribbled furiously, working through her fears. What was it she wanted to convey? Would it revolve around her journey, her relationship with her father, her mentor's influence? Claire realized that this moment wasn't merely about sharing her story. It was a chance to reclaim her narrative, to affirm her individuality against familial expectations. Claire pondered how her journey could resonate with others. She recalled her mentor's latest workshops, where they explored various storytelling techniques. It wasn't about perfection, it was about connecting through shared humanity. The notion crystallized into a foundation for her speech. She wanted to illuminate the struggles many face in defining themselves apart from legacy, all while maintaining the delicate authenticity she had so fervently sought. Returning home, Claire felt a new surge of motivation. She began formulating her speech, weaving in anecdotes of self-discovery, blended with heartfelt reflections of her relationship with her father, the weight of his expectations, the pressure to conform, and ultimately her choice to step away from the shadow. The more she wrote, the more empowered she felt, the energy of her narrative flowing like a current through her veins. Yet, as the day of the engagement drew closer, unsettling questions clawed at her mind. What if she faltered on stage, exposed her raw emotions, and stumbled over her words? Claire's stomach tightened with the realization that this encounter would put her authenticity to the test in the most public way. This wasn't just her voice, this was her identity laid bare, there for all to scrutinize. Fear whispered insistently, threatening to pull her back into the depths of self-doubt. But somewhere deep inside, the resilience she had cultivated was fighting back. She had taken leaps before, turning chaos into creativity. She could do it again. As she prepared, Claire found herself reflecting not on the fear of failure, but rather the potential for connection, an opportunity to influence others facing their own struggles with identity. Each word she penned resonated with purpose and affirmation. The day arrived. Standing backstage, heart racing, she felt an electric pulse of anticipation and anxiety. Moments before stepping out into the light, Claire closed her eyes, calmed her breath, and anchored herself in her intention to share an authentic voice that demanded to be heard. With a deep breath, Claire stepped onto the stage, ready to embrace whatever unfolded. But as the spotlight hit her, one thought spiraled through her mind. What would she discover about herself in this moment of vulnerability? The tension in her chest shifted into determination as she opened her mouth to speak, her heart pounding in alignment with the rhythm of her words. In that instant, Claire understood she was not simply voicing her story, she was claiming her rightful place within it, inviting others to join her on this transformative journey toward authenticity. But just as she began to feel the rush of connection swell within, an unexpected figure materialized from the audience, a face she never thought she'd see again. What did this mean for Claire's journey? Would her past come rushing back, or could she transcend it all? Claire's mind whirled as she spotted the figure in the audience, a familiar face that reeked of unresolved tensions and unspoken words. For a fleeting second, she felt like a deer caught in the headlights. Why was he here? The man's presence surged memories of her past to the forefront, reminders of the insecurities she had fought so hard to cast aside. As she regained composure, she recognized that the moment had shifted. No longer was she merely the storyteller. She was now being drawn into an uninvited dialogue that threatened to unravel her carefully crafted narrative. What had she expected? That her journey could exist in isolation from the complicated web of her past? The unexpected visitor seemed to lean into the moment, eyes focused on her with an intensity that set her heart racing. No longer was she an anonymous figure behind the podium. She felt exposed, raw, as the weight of her father's expectations once again pressed down upon her. Could she risk vulnerability with her story while confronting remnants of a life she'd fought so hard to escape? The audience watched in silence, seeming to hold their breath alongside her. In a split-second decision, she chose to lean into the challenge instead of retreating. She paused, allowing the nervous energy coursing through her to reshape itself into a powerful resolve. If her journey had always been about authenticity, then perhaps this was where the true test lay. Life often brings us back to inexplicable moments and people who cast the longest shadows, she spoke aloud, her voice steady yet layered with emotion. This is for everyone who feels haunted by their past, who wrestles with who they are versus who they're expected to be. As she spoke, she felt the atmosphere of the room shift. The weight that had initially felt suffocating began to transform into a shared experience. As she recalled her fears and triumphs, Claire realized she wasn't merely reciting facts about her life. She was allowing others, including this unexpected figure, to witness her evolution. The truth had become a bridge rather than a barrier. Emboldened, she remembered her mentor's wisdom. Your story is yours to own. So she embraced the moment and used it to transcend the discomfort resting on her heart. The timing of this encounter was serendipitous, a potent reminder that the path to authenticity often entailed facing the very relationships that threatened to overshadow her journey. Her focus sharpened as she began to weave her narrative with moments of humor and pain, the bittersweet tapestry that defined her relationship with her father. The audience remained rapt, perhaps recognizing echoes of their own struggles, as Claire urged them to see their pain as a crucible for growth rather than a chain of regret. Yet, within the swell of empowerment, a flicker of doubt lingered. Each breath she took was interlaced with the challenge of exposing her heart while still standing firm in her emerging identity. Would she finally be able to transcend the weight of her past, or would this confrontation redefine her journey in ways she hadn't anticipated? As her speech wound to a close, she glanced once more at the figure who had once been a significant part of her life. Questions danced unsaid between them, threads of their shared history weaving tighter in the present moment. Their eyes locked, and in that stillness Claire felt a shift, a recognition that she might have the power to reconnect, not just with those she had lost, but with every piece of herself. But as the speech concluded and applause erupted around her, one undeniable thought struck her. Claire had not just shared her story, she had thrust herself into the heart of conversation. Would she have the courage to reach out, to confront what lay beneath the surface of that familiar gaze? The air hummed with anticipation as she stepped down from the stage, the real work about to begin. Engaging with her audience had ignited something powerful, but now, confronting the man from her past loomed before her like an uncharted path. Could she find the words amid the swirling uncertainty, or would she let this chance slip away? Claire stepped off the stage, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of her performance. The applause lingered like echoes in a vast chamber, but all she could focus on was him, the source of her lingering discomfort and intrigue. Was it even possible that standing before him could unlock a part of her she thought she had buried? Walking toward him felt akin to crossing a tightrope stretched over a chasm of unspoken grievances and unrelenting fears. As she approached, a whirlwind of thoughts surged through her mind. Should she address the past directly, or keep it shrouded in vague references? The idea of vulnerability had at once liberated her during her speech and paralyzed her now. What would she say? The years and distance between them transformed the encounter into a surreal canvas of possibilities. "Hi." The word slipped from her lips, unexpectedly small in the charged atmosphere. The man smiled, but his eyes held a complexity that made her chest tighten. It was a smile layered with memories of laughter, but tinted with the colors of unresolved conflict, the very essence of their history. "Claire, I wasn't sure you'd recognize me," he replied, his voice casual yet tinged with unexpected gravity. "Of course I did," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. It's been a while." They both chuckled awkwardly, the laughter a flimsy shield against the piercing silence that followed. There was so much left unsaid, years trapped in the amber of their shared history. Claire felt the weight of this moment pressing down on her, and for once she acknowledged that the need to confront this past could also bring forth clarity. She remembered the evening conversations filled with dreams and aspirations, which had morphed into shadows of bitterness. As she navigated these recollections, she caught herself questioning who she was becoming and who he had been to him. "What's next for you?" he asked, feigning lightness, yet Claire perceived the subtext hidden in his words. It was the perfect opening, a chance to break down the walls that had divided them for too long. She had stepped into her vulnerability on stage. Could she do it now? "I'm learning to navigate this journey of authenticity. It's about more than just the story I tell. It's how I live it, how I engage with the people around me, like you even." His expression shifted, the casual facade cracking as the weight of her words sank in. She pressed on, driven by an urgency she hadn't felt before. "I've spent so long avoiding confrontation, and I can't keep doing that, not anymore." She saw recognition flicker in his eyes, and it steeled her resolve. Perhaps he had felt abandoned or misunderstood, just as she had. Claire wanted to believe there was still a way forward for them, a path that could lead to understanding and healing. "Why did you come here?" she asked, her voice firm despite the tremor of uncertainty. "I needed to see you, to hear your story," he replied, the truth nestled between the lines of his vulnerability. In that moment, Claire realized they were both at a crossroads, their lives intertwined yet fragile. Could they rebuild the connection that had once flourished in their youth? As she stood before him, she understood that simply having this conversation was a step forward. To reveal the deeper pains that had held her hostage for all these years, she would have to peel back layers of resentment and fear, confronting not only him but also the ghosts of her own past. Can we try to talk about everything?" she ventured, the weight of her words pulling her deeper into an emotional current that she could not escape. She needed him to understand, perhaps more than she needed absolution. Just as his eyes bore into hers, the tension in the air thickened with unfulfilled questions. Could they truly find closure in each other's presence, or were they doomed to repeat old patterns? A shift in the atmosphere stirred, pregnant with uncertainty, but also hope. The time had come for honesty, a reckoning where walls could either shatter or fortify their connection. Claire felt the enormity of her choice hanging above them like a fragile crystal chandelier, just waiting to see if it would fall. Would she dive deeper into the darkness of her past, or would this moment slip away before she found the courage to confront it? Claire stood face to face with the embodiment of her past, her heart racing as she grappled with the weight of the moment. The room was still buzzing from the applause she had just received, yet the swelling tension drew her focus back to him, the person whose presence unraveled layers of her hard-earned confidence. Can we try to talk about everything?" she asked, her voice steady, betraying nothing of the chaos inside. She refused to retreat to the shadows of self-doubt, not after everything she had overcome. He hesitated, then nodded slowly, allowing the space for honesty they both craved. As they sat together, vulnerability softened the edges of their history, revealing pathways where resentment had once ruled. Claire felt clarity blooming within her. The need for resolution outweighed the comfort of silence. "I've realized that I spent years tethered to your expectations, striving in pursuit of validation," Claire confessed, meeting his gaze head-on. "I buried my own dreams beneath the weight of trying to be your idea of successful while fearing failure at every turn. But I am more than just that." Genuine surprise danced across his face, her words evidently cutting. Through old voices entrenched within their dynamic, it felt liberating, this declaration. She leaned in further, uncoiling the narrative that had suffocated her. "I'm reclaiming my story. It's not just about my father's inventions anymore, or the shadows they cast. It's about the legacy I will create on my own terms, the journey I will carve for myself." Claire exhaled deeply, feeling the urgency of her transformation at the forefront of their exchange. His brow furrowed, the initial defensiveness dissipating as he grasped the gravity of her revelation. "I didn't realize the impact my expectations had on you. I only wanted the best," he admitted, genuine remorse coloring his tone. "Yes, but the best isn't always shared," Claire responded, the warmth of forgiveness bubbling to the surface amid that honesty. "It's taken me this long to understand that I have to define what best means for me." They both sat in contemplative silence, the air thick with vulnerability and newfound understanding. As Claire gathered the courage to express her truth, she felt a burden lifting. The years spent running from their collective trauma felt metaphysically shed, replaced with the invigorating possibility of a healthy dialogue. "Every shadow of doubt you cast over my decisions only fueled my desire to prove you wrong," she elaborated, embracing the tangled history they had shared. "But now I can see I am not bound by that narrative. It is time for us both to redefine our perceptions." His response was measured yet sincere. "What can I do to back you up, to support your journey instead of hinder it?" Claire's heart swelled as she embraced the prospect of a shared path forward. "I think it's about creating boundaries. I need to preserve the authenticity that allows me to explore my creativity without the burden of someone else's expectations. Your support would mean recognizing those boundaries and respecting my independence." They exchanged insights, vulnerability bridging the gap between their once awkward relationship. She wove stories of her journey, illustrating how each setback had propelled her to this moment of clarity. He listened, genuinely engaging, as she reinforced her commitment to herself. "I want to create a new narrative that is distinctly mine," Claire managed, confidence illuminating her words as clarity transformed doubt into strength. "One that honors my father, but also paves the way for my own dreams." This confrontation isn't just about my past, it's about everything I choose to move toward. The realization settled over him, and the understanding took root. You've always had the potential to shine, Claire. I often failed to see how to nurture that light without trying to mold it. Let's find a way to celebrate your journey without attachment to my own expectations. I'd like that, he offered, his voice sincere and inviting. Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her, a tangibly palpable shift in their understanding. Despite past grievances, the possibility of reconciliation appeared achievable. Their shared history could pave the way for healing, and perhaps even collaboration. Together, we can create something meaningful, she concluded, infused with a sense of purpose as the world around her dimmed in importance. I can take ownership of my narrative while forging a connection with the past that uplifts rather than binds. As they spoke, the air transformed, igniting trajectories of growth and possibility. Claire felt empowered, no longer seeking validation, but rather engaged in forging new pathways of understanding. In facing what had once divided them, both began to resonate with hope, creating space for mutual growth. With that new commitment incentivizing each of their choices forward, Claire's heart brimmed with anticipation for futures yet unwritten, reshaping identities and redefining relationships. This was the moment, hers alone to embrace. As their conversation continued fluidly, Claire recognized not only the resolution of her conflict, but the personal growth fostered through courage and authenticity. She had transformed from a hesitant figure into a vigorous self-advocate, stepping firmly into an established position marked by solid confidence. The legacy she envisioned was no longer confined to her father's innovations. It was a vibrant tapestry interwoven with the richness of her own journey. Claire saw light at the end of a once dark tunnel, creating the narrative she had always dreamed of, her legacy. What if she shared this cathartic journey? The future beckoned her, urging her forward. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support, so don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Rather than seeking God's favor, Claire saw light at the end of a once dark tunnel, creating the narrative she had always dreamed of, her legacy. What if she shared this cathartic journey? The future beckoned her, urging her forward. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support, so don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.